What's up, everybody? Here we are, day 14, 2 weeks into the I'm Curious to Know project, presented by Inner Voice. It's been an amazing 14 days. I've learned so much about so many incredible people from the endurance sports world. And today might possibly be the most important discussion that I've had for a number of reasons. And I'll kind of give you more context to that. But before I do, I wanted to introduce and welcome Britton Barbee to the show. How are you, Britton?
I'm doing well, Travis. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, mate, it's an absolute pleasure. I kind of alluded this to in the show notes, but you yourself were a football player. You're a Division I football player. You've overcome some challenges in your time, be it injuries and things like that. You've transformed yourself into this endurance athlete through an incredible mindset, incredible physical transformation, and you've done some amazing things in the endurance sports world. But and we met through 29:29. So 29:29, for those people who don't know, is it's an endurance hiking event. You basically walk up a hill, you catch a gondola down, and you do that over and over again until you reach the vertical height of Everest. So that's how we first met. But to be honest, that's not really the reason why you're here. Right. You are an endurance athlete, but there's more that we need to talk about. I, like many people, was really upset and troubled by what happened in the Ahmaud Ivory case. He's gunned down in cold blood in the middle of the street while he's out running. And for me, it could have been easy, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. It could have been very easy to scroll past that. You watch the video, the next thing is a cat video or something like that. And the thought comes into your mind and leaves as quickly as it came. And then on last Saturday, there was tribute runs. People are hashtagging I run with Ahmaud. And it was touching. But then you posted something that really made me stop, really made me take a moment, and really made me think what I could personally do. What conversations do I need to be a part of and be in, to get an understanding and gain knowledge of why this happens and what we can do as a human race and as a society to make sure that it never happens again. I'm going to share the video, and then I'm going to come back to you. So let's do that. I want to show the video for all of you that are watching along at home here.
What would they say about me if I fell victim to hate? What story would they create and try to put in your face? With no criminal record, how far would they reach? Parents married 40 years, they educate, they both teach. Older brother, older sisters, masters, doctoral degrees. But I only a bachelor, something must have been off with me. Didn't go to church every Sunday, just most. Probably never helped out the needy. We found no social media posts. My wife and 3 kids with so much love in our home. Sources say he kept to himself, spent too much time on his phone. He's too passionate, too aggressive. It came off as arrogance. He made people uncomfortable by his size and appearance. Shot broad day, viral clip viewed like it's nothing. People comment, LOL, I guess he shouldn't have been running. And when they see that I'm clean with no bad image to tell, tie me to anyone I've ever met that stepped foot inside jail. What would they say about me? What would they say about you? I pray we start living a way that they never get the chance to.
Oh, I get chills watching it over again. What do you think when you see that? What's your reaction? How do you feel?
A lot of, like we talked about, there's been a lot of thoughts. I'm not typically one to post a whole lot. And, I felt that just like inside myself, I felt, my spirit was telling me that I needed to get that message out. It was never intended to be to rhyme or anything like that at first. And then it just sort of developed that way. And really what got me thinking was in training for these different events, it's something that I'm always outside. I'm always running. And my brother had sent me just a picture. We all have our, Strava apps and Garmin watches. And, we are so focused on making sure that you start the time so that you can see once you finish the time. And, one of the questions that we were talking about is imagine starting that watch and never getting a chance to hit stop. And when I set off on a run, normally our thought is, you know, I got 45 minutes, I got an hour or whatever. Let me just get through this. It's never crossed my mind. It's never crossed my mind that I could be out here in the same situation, running by new construction, and the same thing happening to me, that I tell my wife, hey, I'll be back in an hour. And the next call she gets is, I've been shot in the middle of the street. And, you know, so that's what got me thinking about, well, what would happen if that was me? Because like you mentioned, I think too often we've become so desensitized to what we see, because it's not real to most people. It's theatrical almost. You know, we scroll Instagram or Facebook and you see some horrible act happen, and we don't know the people, so we just keep scrolling, like you said, to find a cat video.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to make sure everyone understood was that, you know, Ahmaud, who was gunned down, the first thing people say is, well, what did he do wrong? And that's the problem, is it's so quick to be, well, there's a justification for a broad daylight murder. It's never, you know, the opposite way. It's never, why did these actions take place? So that's what got me thinking, what would be said if that were to be the person? Because, you know, the first thing that they say is, in the case is, you know, he got in trouble in 2015. He had been, you know, this was said about him, that was said about him, and it's all sources. But then you see his family talking about how good he is, and people say, well, of course his family likes him. But we know one person from high school who said they heard one time he did this. Yep. And so that just gives us the opportunity. It gives, you know, everyone the opportunity to justify that it's okay. And then we move on. Yep. Or we do the run. We hashtag that we run with him. And then we move on to the next thing, because unfortunately there are so many.
Yeah. Yeah, it sat with me, and then you posted it, and I think it was serendipitous that I saw that, and it took me a second to reply, because I wanted to be, I've lived a sheltered life. I'm from Australia. You know, I grew up in a, you know, well-to-do middle-class family. We never wanted for anything. I've spent the last 11 years in North America. I've lived in some of the biggest cities. I don't know what it's like. I don't have an understanding. And I also am kind of nervous and afraid that I'm going to say the wrong thing by trying to engage in the conversation. And that's what I expressed to you is, where does this conversation start, and how can I be a part of it to make it better? Because I know that you've had your own experiences with racism. You've had your own experiences with dealing with these issues. And I want to be a friend, and I want to be a citizen and a human being that takes care and looks out for fellow human beings and fellow citizens of the world. I don't just want to stand by as an apathetic bystander anymore. And that's where I want to engage with you and get an understanding of, like, what can I do? What can you do? What can the people watching and listening do?
Right. And honestly, what we do is exactly what we're doing now. It's the conversation. And, you know, it doesn't even have to be black, white, you know, born in America, born elsewhere, because, you know, racism blends the lines of so many different things. It blends classism, and ultimately people just want to protect their own kind. It's selfishness almost. I want to take care of me and my people, and I don't want anybody to step in on that. And so the conversation starts from just creating awareness. You know, you and I connected just but a few weeks ago, and here we are having, you know, some of the most impactful conversations just one-on-one that we've had. And it's through these conversations that we spread that. And not being afraid to have that conversation, because too many people are waiting to be told what to think. Too many people are waiting to be told, you know, if you see a black man at night, it's dangerous because their parents told them that, movies told them that, or if you see someone who is of a different religion than you, well, they're dangerous because of whatever. So there's always going to be that. And I think the reason people don't like the conversation, honestly, is because it's too big of a goal. You know, when people sit back and say, well, how do we end racism? We won't. And ultimately, we have to change the goal. And if we really look at saying, how do we end racism, you know, ultimately we'll fail. But if we say, how can we improve on the awareness of people understanding that, you know, it really boils down to, you know, just being human. Like you said, it doesn't have to be white, black. At the end of the day, you know, you strip away race, you strip away religion, what we all are humans with lungs that breathe, hearts that, and then we got brains that think.
Yeah.
And they think one of two ways. They either think this is how things are and this is how they'll always be, or they think, that growth mindset of, I can learn this, I can be accepting of different cultures. And that's really where we have to shift the focus.
It seems simple. It's not simple. Like, it's uncomfortable to engage. Like, I think that one of the beautiful things of this pandemic is that we're now becoming more connected to the people that we potentially don't know. People are waving to each other in the street, whereas in the past they would have just put their head down and looked at their phone and continued walking. So I think that, like, maybe this is an opportunity for us to get a little bit uncomfortable and acknowledge our neighbor and talk to our neighbor and try and get an understanding of who they are and what they're going through. Because we're all in, for the first time, maybe, definitely in our lifetime, but for a very long time, we're all suffering from the same thing. We're suffering from the same affliction of being locked in our houses, and there's this pandemic. So there is this connectedness that we haven't had before, but it's still uncomfortable to have a conversation or sit down with someone you don't know who's from a different background, maybe a different religion, a different race, different upbringing, and have a real conversation and get to know them.
Right. And I think, one of the things that you said that made me think is, all of us are better than one of us. Right. And, through this pandemic, you have seen it. You have people, getting to know your neighbors, simple things. I mean, growing up, we knew everyone on the block, and that's not really the case anymore because everybody does their own thing. And that's partly, I think, just the advancement of everyone trying to get ahead and trying to do more. And I'm guilty of it myself. But this has caused us to slow down a little bit, get to know people. But, that requires vulnerability, and it's not cute. It's not sexy to be big and share your feelings, because we've been taught that that's not good. And really, that's where the best conversations lie. I mean, you sharing, how you overcame your, getting hit by a car, just on a whim. I mean, you're able to learn so much about a person through their story, and everybody has a story. And that's what people forget. Everyone's so centrally focused on me and my agenda that we forget that Travis McKenzie has a story, that Britton Barbee has a story. And that's really the sharing of those stories is how we navigate through all this, so that there can be a better understanding of how to treat people. I mean, it's real simple, right? How do you want to be treated and cast that off? But, I also, thinking about it, no one's ever going to classify themselves in a world full of classifications, whether it's political parties, races, religions, different things like that. No one's ever going to self-classify as a racist. Well, I don't like Black people, but I'm not racist because I would never murder one. It's the justification of, well, I'm not against Muslims. I just don't want to talk to them. So I'm not racist. And so that's the problem, that it's the fear of the unknown, someone different than me. It's like a new kid showing up to school who looks different, and all of a sudden he's going to steal your spot on the baseball team. You don't like him because of how he looks. So you find that one thing that you can hate him for.
You share, what you share is meaningful with the videos, but it's also reality. You've shared with me that you have had instances where you've been targeted. You've been, there's been racism directed towards you. You've been stopped while you're out running. So this isn't some far-fetched idea or ideal that you hold. It's something that you've experienced yourself.
Right. And I think that's part of the reason why I posted the video, because people who know me outside of work, at work, they know I'm a pretty intense guy. I'm about performance and pushing the limit. But what they don't see is, when I do get home late at night and I do go for a run, the thought of being followed by a cop while you complete your run, because he's patrolling the area, ask you what is your address? Hey, it's dangerous. Why don't you hop in the car and I'll take you home? It's so, it's almost, it's hard to fathom for so many people, because they would say, well, why would a police officer pull you over if you're just running? Now, if you're snooping around, then I understand. You see that's where people start to say, well, you wouldn't just get pulled over. The first time that it happened, my wife was like blown away, but she knew that it happened. We have these community Facebook groups, and, there's a men's, there's a women's, there's a group, and it's not uncommon for people to say, hey, I saw a large black man walking a dog, be careful. I don't know about you. I have an Australian Labradoodle, and it's got a pink leash. It's about 35 pounds. If that's scary to somebody, because I'm just out here trying to get time on my feet, that's unfortunate. And so, yeah, I've been pulled over. I've lived in my neighborhood for 3 years, and I have been pulled over and 3 times. And I think it just blows people away, because the thought of being pulled over is, well, you were speeding, you ran a red light, you did something. Man, I'm running about a 12-minute mile. I am not moving fast. And, that's something that I have to deal with. And I normally run with the hood on, not from a sense of I'm up to anything wrong. I like to wear hot clothes when it's hot. That's just how I train. And I've had to make that adjustment in my head that this might not be the best case, because as I mentioned before, my whole idea of working out is to, stay in shape so I can be here for my family. It never crossed my mind that me wearing a hood, being 6'1", weighing 285 pounds, that could also, me be out working out, could be the reason that I'd never come back home. Mm-hmm. And so those are just the things that I wanted people to understand, that it happens. And, unfortunately, too often what you see is the anger and the hatred from the Black community. I'm blessed I grew up, I'm biracial. My mother's Caucasian, my father's African-American. And so I never grew up seeing color. We didn't really know what that was. I didn't learn I was Black in the eyes of others until I was 8 or 9 years old. And so seeing these things happen to people that know me, it kind of sheds light on it. It creates awareness, because otherwise, when you don't know somebody, it's no different than a show that you see on Netflix. Yep. It's no different than a movie, because normally we watch these shows. And if you think about it, the best shows show the persecution of some type of people, be it Jewish, be it Black, be it Muslim, people who've been persecuted. Those are the shows that people love to watch, because they can't fathom that people would be treated in such a way, because I would never treat somebody that way. But the reality of it is it happens simply just because people are different. And so, experiencing it myself, hands-on, my dad always taught me to handle it with education, because, like I said, I don't get offended if someone calls me a nigger. I just don't. That's me personally. Now, I'm not saying if somebody else gets offended by it, that they're wrong. I'm just saying how I've been raised is, why would I elicit the response that they want? If someone has in their head that they're going to call me a name, regardless of the notoriety around the name or how bad the term is, why would I respond in the way that's going to help, cement exactly what it was they thought? See, there he goes. They're ignorant. They're aggressive. That's why they're less than. But when you hold the education and you don't let words affect you, my mom said, never let someone's words, keep you in a spot. If you don't believe that's what you are, that's not what you are. So why would you get upset by it? And it's the education. That's just what we have to have. Yeah.
It's even like, it gives me goosebumps that you've even had to experience that, because no one would ever come up to me and say, you're white, or you're this, or you're whatever. And I don't have to worry. I've never had to have that thought in my head of, I'm going to come back to someone with education because they use a derogatory, hateful term towards me. So the fact that you've even had to have that education and training from your parents to, like, this is how you handle that, is wrong. Like, to me, that's disgusting and wrong that you handle it the way you handle it. But the fact that you had to have that teaching from your parents makes me sick.
Well, it is unfortunate. It's one of those things that, hearing you say that, that's actually the first time I've ever thought of the fact that I've had that training. I've been so focused on the fact that I don't let words really affect me, that I've never realized that you haven't had that same training, or haven't had to be in that, thought process. And so it's real, it's out there. I think it's how we choose to respond to it is really what's going to be the most impactful as we look to move forward and say, okay, well, how can we do this? And look, I understand there's so much pain out there. I get it. there's an article every day you can find. That's the
Yeah.
tough part about the news, is it's so easy to find bad things. Very rarely do we highlight the good. And so we're classically conditioned to assume the worst. If I'm walking down the street, well, it could be dangerous. This could be bad for me because I saw a movie once, and that's what's in our mind. And I just think that we have to get to a spot where we're moving forward just through being positive, sharing positive stories. But there's so much pain around what's happened, especially white, Black in America, Black and police in America. There's a lot of mistrust because just when you think things might be going well, something else happens. And now with how quickly things can be recorded, access to information, if you find out that there was some kind of murder and a cop was involved and it was a Black teenager and they turn their camera off, left unknown, people are going to come to their own conclusion. And unfortunately that pain is there. And I don't know that the pain is going to go away for everybody, but the only thing that we can really do, you asked, how do we start this conversation? It starts with the people that and we spread that out through lifting people up, just in a positive way. That's really the only thing that's gonna get us moving forward.
I think of social media, and I think of the story you told me, or you're telling now, of everyone comes to the worst conclusion. They see the video, the guy turns it off, and then all of a sudden there's a Black kid is killed, or what have you. So that's the problem with social media. But there's also some positives. I feel like there's been these opportunities where justice has been served because of these types of campaigns, where people bring light to these situations that possibly would have just been swept under the rug in the past, that no one heard of, no one knows of. There's no justice done, and there's no resolution. So for every bad thing, I also think it brings to light more opportunity for justice, more opportunity for people to be educated and learn and have connections like we've had. So I think that used for good, it could be a tool that actually really helps further this conversation at a faster rate in the right places.
I agree 100%. I mean, there are so many positives that do happen, because I think what happens is when something does go, say, viral, for instance, and people do see it and say, hey, this isn't right. I think the pain that I was mentioning beforehand, really what it is people just want to be heard. I mean, how would anyone feel, regardless of race, if one of their family members was out for a job and was gunned down, and then the only coverage that it's getting is the guys that shot him were doing, a civil duty. They were making a lawful citizen's arrest. And all people really want to do is be heard. Yeah. And so sometimes it does, unfortunately, take to get the attention of the world today. There's got to be a catchy hashtag. There's got to be some kind of clip to get people's attention. When really the only thing people are crying out for is a little help, and just to be seen in a light that people just want to be treated like people.
Yeah. I want to go back to that feeling that I had where I scroll through, I actually see Ahmaud get shot in the street, and he tries to run away and he falls to the ground. And it disturbed me, and it disturbed my wife. But so many people would have just moved past that. Like,
they did.
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't have the answer, but it just makes me wonder, like, are we so conditioned to seeing this stuff on TV and in movies that all of a sudden, when it's real, we can't distinguish between fake and reality? I don't know. It's sad that's the case.
I absolutely think that's where we are. We've become so immune to wrongdoing. We become so immune to cameras being everywhere and catching everything. If somebody dies, I mean, what was it when Kobe Bryant's helicopter escaped? You have sheriffs on the scene taking pictures to share with people, because oh, look, I was at the scene. Here's a picture of Kobe Bryant. Because for whatever reason, people can say that they're just chasing attention. Everybody, that's where it gets back into the selfishness of where all this breeds from. Hate comes from being selfish. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people who are that way are not educated. They don't understand their actions. I was told a long time ago the most disappointing part of being an adult is growing up and realizing that everyone's just a bunch of kids. And at 23 years old, I heard that and I'm thinking, nah, everyone's gonna think how I think. If I'm here and I work hard and I know I want to get to here, everyone at the level is gonna think like I think. And then I got there and I was told, I was so disappointed. I got people upset they're not getting invited to parties. I'm talking men in their 50s, upset over this, that, and the other. And I can't understand like how that would hurt someone's feelings, but yet everyone's got their own story, right? Like we talk about. So when people get their feelings hurt and they react in a different way. And when we see things on social media, sometimes right, wrong, or indifferent, there's always that comment section. That's why I said in the video, shot broad day, viral clips viewed like it's nothing. And then you just go down and people are like, well, he was running, he must have been up to no good. Yeah. And then they just go on and up about the next day. They're checking their fantasy football. They're sending something they think is funny because it's not real to them.
Yeah.
And it's really not real to anybody outside of that circle of people, unless you're a part of, I've never been in that level. Obviously, I haven't had anything around me of that great tragedy, but, imagine how the family feels when they're having to defend the life of someone who was just murdered.
Yeah.
I just think that like you mentioned, people are, it's not real. TV, movies, and all these different things have made it, it's Netflix. I mean, Instagram to most people is just, it's not real because I don't know that person. Therefore, I don't care about that person. Therefore, the fact that two white men, shot this guy in the middle of the street, I'm not racist, so I'm just going to move on.
Yeah. I would never do that. So what's next? Well, I want to spend the last kind of 15 minutes we have here together to really think about what people can do, what people at home can do, what can you and I do, what can we do that's going to make a difference? As you said earlier, we're not going to solve racism. We're not going to eradicate racism. What can we do to make it a little bit better, to save lives? Like that's what you said to me. We had a conversation yesterday. Talk about percentages. That's like tens of thousands of lives that are saved just by a small percentage of us getting better and this happening less. Like, what can we do?
Right. Well, like I mentioned, I think it's conversations just like this. It's and I appreciate you using your platform to touch on a topic like this. It takes courage from someone in your position to do that. And you may not see it that way, but it really does, because sometimes what people don't want to do is they don't want that label. They don't want that label of, oh, well, now, all of a sudden Britton Barbee's a Black activist. Apparently I'm a Black Panther now, and not even really knowing what that means. But Travis McKenzie, he's using his platform to highlight real issues. And, some of the people who, you think of people in the past who've used their platform to stand up for something that's right. In the time that they do it, they are the most hated. They get drugged through the mud. Their whole image is ruined. Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, these people that have done these things that in the moment, they take so much hatred and, to risk everything, so that you can get your point across, is a big deal. But like I was mentioning with you, we have this conversation. This video gets shared, people watch it. They take the time to say, hey, like you said, hey, I'm curious. I don't know, how do we have this conversation? Well, we just do it. We talk. And then from there, it sparks conversations with other people. And then, like I said, it doesn't even have to be white, Black. It's all different beliefs, and understanding that really all that we're trying to do is know strangers better. Not everyone thinks the way that we do. You and I can come from two different sides and come up with the same conclusion, and how we got there is totally different. And so, have these conversations, across the country, and you have these conversations to where, if you're standing in line for the bus, you're standing in line, to get food, do you, like you said, do you have your phone? Do you have your phone in your hand, head down? You're missing out on so much. Spark up a conversation. Hey, you never know what someone's going through. Like, what's the worst that can happen if you tell someone good morning? Regardless of if they, the craziest thing about all this is, and, I see it all the time with how people get political, and that ends friendships, that ends relationships. And, as adults, we have to understand we can like different things and still get along.
Yeah.
And so it's the conversations of just being aware that, what people face, it's also, taking action. Like you said, I think one of the most impactful things that in the short time of knowing you that you said was, everyone ran with the mob, but then what do we do?
Yeah.
After the hashtag, what do we do?
What's next?
So the next time that you're at a stoplight, do you all of a sudden, say someone cuts you off in traffic, whatever it is, do you immediately say exactly, in your head, something about that person because how they look? You're still a part of the problem, because until you can sit across from someone who's different than you and not be fearful of them, and have the humility to realize that we're all the same. We're all the same, regardless of social status or whatever. I think that's where it has to start.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's idealistic, and that's okay. I think we can have this idealistic view that things can be better, because if we play into, well, I can't make enough of a difference, so I'm not even going to start and I'm not even going to try, then we've lost. So I think we need to start with this goal of like, we can have an impact and we can make a difference. And it's fucking scary. Like, it is scary to put yourself out there. And I think like part of the nervousness for me before this conversation was, I don't want to say something wrong. I don't want to be someone who is trying to sound like they understand and they're trying to make a point and they say something wrong. And I think that is probably the way a lot of people feel, is there's judgment around how to have this conversation without saying something that's going to offend someone. And I think that, that is something that we need to consider. Like, we need to consider, like, where's the judgment from both sides, that we don't have to be perfect in that conversation to make a difference.
No, absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point. My wife and I were talking about this earlier. She had a friend who said, hey, listen, her friend who's Black, she said, I cannot be the person that you ask all your Black questions to. I can't. This conversation has to come from awareness. You can't say, well, I know this one Black person, I'm gonna reserve all my questions for said Black individual. It doesn't work that way, because then you're getting one side. You're only getting one perspective. So you have these conversations, and there's nothing that you can say wrong, because I know you're coming from a place of genuine curiosity. You're saying, hey, how can we do this? So who would I to say, hey, I'm ready to have a conversation about how we can move this forward, and you ask me something and then all of a sudden I get offended? That would literally be going back on everything that I'm saying is about moving forward. So I think both sides, for the people who have been oppressed in a certain way, right? You have to be willing to have the conversation, remove the ego from it. And by when I'm talking about an ego, is the selfishness, remove the hate. Because if someone's genuinely asking, how can we make this better? Because, and maybe they have these perceptions, you have to be okay as the person that's having that conversation to answer it in a way that doesn't elicit an argument, because that's not what it's about. If someone like you is trying to move forward and ask questions, I could pull the classic, oh, well, but what about slavery? Travis McKenzie can't do anything about that. I can't do anything about that. But what we can do is we can move forward. So, I would even say drop the worry. And if someone, if someone comes to me and says, hey, I have someone I work with was like, I've never experienced anything like you've experienced. Like, what should I know? I said, hey, where do you want to start? And like you said, a lot of people don't even want to start because it's so big, the concept's so big, but it's momentum. If people start having these conversations, and then it's not just tens, it's hundreds, it's thousands. And then in those instances where we don't have those trigger responses to, this, that, or the other, when you see something going wrong and you can step out and say, this isn't right. You never know, what people don't realize is how many conversations save lives, whether it be you make someone's day. And so, they don't commit suicide. They don't do this. They don't do this hateful act because they were shown love, because really that's what's missing, is that connection, that sense of belonging. And that only happens through conversations. That's the only way that it happens.
Yeah, you're right. People want to be seen and people want to be heard and they want to be understood. And I think that the other point I want to make is, it's probably we'd be remiss to say to someone to go out and just have a conversation about race with someone they don't know. So I think you have to set the boundaries and you have to set the expectations with each other, that it is a safe place, that we can have this conversation. There's not going to be offense. There's not going to be these things. So, maybe it is that moment of, hey, I want to learn and I want to know. And the other person on the other side has to be willing to engage with you. Otherwise, there is that risk of offending someone or not having the right words to express yourself. So yeah, like little asterisks on that, like make sure the other person is willing and ready to engage with you before you just start having a deep conversation with them.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend walking up to someone and saying, "Hey, tell me how hard it is to be Black in America."
Yeah,
but if you start, Travis, with a different, I think through learning more about people, if you're genuinely interested in other people, you'd be amazed at what comes of it. So if the conversation starts off with, learning about that individual, what's the most interesting thing going on in your life right now? Through conversation, genuine conversation, it doesn't mean that you can't have an endpoint. Hey, I want to learn more about this individual and what it is that they face, because it's not something that I do. And then from this conversation, you share it with your wife, she shares it with a colleague. And so it starts creating the awareness of, wow, this is a real problem. This is what's happening. And really, to be a part of the solution, I just can't be silent. That's really what it comes to. A lot of people think that they can't help, so they just don't do anything at all. But really, the momentum of just starting that conversation. And again, there might be people watching this who say, no, I mean, I have great, relationships with everybody. There's probably, because everybody who puts themselves into a class, race, religious, whatever, there's always going to be that feeling of you're an outsider and you're different than somebody else. What you practice is different than everybody else. And how can we be more accepting of it through conversation and the familiarity of it's okay that you don't do the same thing for me. And honestly, there's so much pressure for people to do what everybody else is doing that so many people spend all their time waiting to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And until people start thinking for themselves, I mean, there's so much happiness out there. Happiness is free. It's just that you choose to see that.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. Like you're a happy guy. You're a positive guy. You have an amazing family. You have an amazing career. You've got goals you've set for yourself. You're pursuing them on a daily basis. So this isn't, to give some context on you as a human being, this isn't, you're not sitting in this and dwelling on this day to day. You're living your life the best way you possibly can. And you took a moment in time to acknowledge and recognize that something needed to be said and something needs to be done in that moment.
Right. Well, and that's me doing my part. Travis, that's me doing my part. Like I said, when I went out for a run and I felt that on my heart to kind of say, because the connections that I've made with posting one video started a conversation with so many people. So the exact thing that we're saying needs to happen is already happening, because people are saying, hey, I never knew that about, I can't even think of getting pulled over. And unfortunately, the way that I operate, I'm a big like, hey, obstacles come, overcome it, keep going, keep going, keep going. So I don't really reflect on the things that have happened to me. Sometimes my wife points out things that happened to me because I just brush them off. If someone's really going to be a certain way, treat me a certain way just because of how my skin is, that's on them. I mean, it's not on me to change their heart. All I can really do is show with my actions. I'm not going to give them the response that they want. And, you walk away from it. That's really what it is. And so I think that we just have to continue putting it out there that, this is real, it's day to day. We don't fix it tomorrow. It's not fixed in a week. But when you look up in a year and you've had, if you even say, I'll even Travis say this, if you can have one meaningful conversation with somebody that's different than you every month, that's 12 in a year. And then Jesse's big on math. So, you can sit there and say, well, if I did, one a week, that's 52 meaningful conversations that you have. And then from there, it just keeps growing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you talked about this platform, and I feel very grateful to be able to have conversations with different people than myself, people who have, different backgrounds. But the trouble is, and this has been something that's always on my mind, the endurance sports world that I'm well immersed in and have kind of lived my life in is traditionally white males. There's inequality in female participation. There's an inequality in African American and other races. It's traditionally white males. So that's, you look at people I've had on the show, and they're people that are in this world. So I'm very determined that it may not happen within this platform. It may not happen within this world. I commit to and make a goal of providing better representation on this particular show and this particular platform. But there's also other platforms, and there's other ways. I don't have to record every conversation I have. You and I can get on the phone once a week and have this and talk about this and reflect back and set goals for each other. And it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street at all. Like you have a responsibility as much as I have a responsibility to bring this to light and to move the ball down the field. So, long way of saying, yes, I'm grateful for this platform. And short way of saying, it's not only just going to happen here for me. Like, people don't need to see me having these conversations every time.
Right. No, and I agree with you 100%. I think that's, touching on the endurance world. I didn't know what endurance sports was. I'm a shot put guy. I was never running long distance. Okay. So that world of, going and doing these 100-mile races and different things that I've been introduced with Jesse and Mark and these guys is something that it became less about the distance, and it came more about the mindset. And so I think the awareness of having different people on, and I would never sit back and think that you haven't tried to have it. But like you said, I honestly think in the 29 community, I'm one of very few. Because it's a platform that people would say, well, that's not for me. And really, all that you're trying to do is find like-minded people. And that's why I have fully immersed myself into, Build Your Life Resume, 29, these different things. I'm one of very few different looking individuals. But I'm okay with that. If I was in a room full of people that all look like me, I'm still going to find a way to stand out. And so, I'm going to figure out a way to talk to people and bring people in and introduce people to different worlds. If you're not trying something new, you're not pushing yourself, I ran a last minute marathon just to see if I could. And you're either going to fail or run farther than you've ever ran. And I did both. I completed a marathon, and that's the furthest I've ever gone. But it has to be, like you said, two-way.
Yeah. I applaud you. I applaud the way that you live your life. I applaud the way that you have handled this situation with me. I applaud the way that you show up every week. The questions, your curiosity, your presence within that community, within the broader community, within the world is something that I look up to and I applaud. And I appreciate you being so open and honest and vulnerable and being able to share and educate and provide knowledge, and it's meaningful. So I really appreciate you for that.
No, thank you. I thank you for giving the opportunity to have the conversation. Like I told you, if anything this conversation does is if it starts someone else having one, then I feel like we were successful. I feel like what was on my heart, last Saturday, and how everything kind of just you're in the middle of this. The idea of you having the show where you're doing a segment a day. I mean, that's tough stuff, man. But you're getting it done. I mean, for this to come out of nowhere, it needed to be said. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and it's something that doesn't need to stop. It's a work in progress, and that's where we got to keep it. Yeah.
You're a legend. Let's do this again. Let's stay in touch. Let's have more of these conversations. I want to provide people with an opportunity. If they do want to reach out to you, they want to talk to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch? Share your deets, share your information, so we can make sure that.
Probably just my Instagram. It's just my name, Britton Barbee, at Britton Barbee. I'm open to people that know me. Know I like to talk. I love the conversation, and it's something that if the more that it's had, the better. So I'm happy to. I would love to do this again, because I hope from this questions come in, and I think they will. That people are going to want to say, well, what are the steps? And you know, you and I talked about it. We don't know what the steps are, but what we're saying is we got to figure out what the steps should be, and I think we can all do that together.
Well, it's a bit, you said it perfectly before. People often wait to be told what to do. And sometimes you just have to think for yourself and what's the best course of action. We're going to make it up as we go, but we're going to be open to it as we go. We've had a few little fan moments here. I'm going to bring those up before we leave. We've got Baylor here. Great job, fellas. This was powerful. Thanks, Baylor. Eric agrees. And then our mate here, Kevin Walker, as well. Thanks, Kevin, for showing up. You're another legend of our community. We really appreciate it. Britton, mate, this has been super powerful, life-changing for me, honestly. And if people want to join a thoughtful discussion, you know how to find me, you know how to find Britton. And yeah, we're here. We're all in this together.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Yeah, big love. Thanks, mate.